Hello, everybody. Yeah, in continuity to this, my topic, I'm in element 5, electrical safety. We're talking also about the control measures of electric safety. What are the control measures? Protections of conductors, right? Electrical conductors should be protected by insulation, right? Insulation, so that the person is not exposed to a live conductors. For example, cables should also be insulated by an unbroken or undamaged sweat, so that the live copper or conductor are not exposed, and the cases on the drilling should be intact, so that the user cannot make contact with the live components within, right? It is also essential that the equipment is inspected and maintained to ensure that the insulations or the protective layers are not damaged, and also that where access may be possible, for example via or electrical panel or switch gear, the access doors are locked all the time. So this simply means in the control measures that electrical cables or wire, they should always have insulation, right? Because anything can lead to the damage of this wire. Animal can cut this one, pest also can control this one, cut this one, so rat also can cut the cable. So there are a lot of way by which cable can be exposed to people. So by doing these insulations, it can protect the cable inside, right? Even if the outer layers of the insulation get damaged, it cannot reach the cable inside, right? So wherever you have an electricity or electrical room, you should always keep all these areas closed in your home or in your offices, right? It should not be exposed to everybody. Not everybody should have the authorization to enter this vicinity or this room where is the electrical room. So these are safety measures that you need to put into consideration and also put it into practice in our home and offices, right? So we're looking at the strength and capability of equipment, some of this equipment that we are using. So safe handling of equipment in a normal condition depend on what? When we are using equipment in a safe in a normal condition, one, you have to select an equipment and design for the purpose and the purpose that this machine should be using, right? The temperature, the natural hazard. So use machine for the appropriate use, right? Then number two, you have to use the equipment according to the manufacturer recommendations or not exceeding the electrical strength or capability. This simply means that manufacturers, they already put a manual in every machine that you should follow this manual, you should follow this procedure, which should be the maintenance, and also the electrical voltage that these machines they're supposed to use. So you have to use this one and put it into consideration. Then point number three, you have to use a suitable protective device, right? Suitable protective device, sometimes there are some devices which can dictate that if there is any electrical fault, it will show the locations or the points at which there is an electrical fault, right? Then you're talking about point number four, you have to accessing any likely mechanical damage, carry out effective inspections and maintenance routine and operation of by the competent person. So this simply means that in every area you should have a person who are legally authorized to check the electrical cables and other areas for electricity every month or every week, to do a visibility study and check whether this area is okay, right? So these are measures also. Then we're talking about advantage of electrical safety, and we're talking about the limitation of protective system, right? Protective device incorporated into an electrical circuit or equipment itself, severely to cut off the electrical supplier is the event of fault, and also to reduce the strength of an electrical shock shock should someone come into contact with the proper supply. What are the reasons? For example, talking about a fuse. Fuse form the weak link in the circuit by the overheating and melting by the design of the current exceeding the safe limits. Right? They can cheap and also reliable but very easy to bypass. So it simply means that the fuse, whenever there is a high voltage of every machine, the fuse is the first one that can be damaged, right? So we're talking about number 2, talking about the main actual circuit breaker. Right, this is called the MCB. Right, the MCB is the mechanical device in the form of a switch which automatically open if the circuit overload. Right, this is the circuit breaker. So if there is an overheat or overloaded in any equipment, right, electrical, so this circuit breaker, the MCB, will automatically go off and all area will also go off. But this MCB is served as a deterrent, right? So the other areas, like let's say other equipment in the other building or facility, will not get damaged, right? It will protect them. So because it stands as a signal, as a device which detects any faults, right? And it will automatically use the e-stop. It also have an e-stop in it, right? So we're talking about hearting. What is hearting? Hearting is the expose of metal parts which should also be normally carry the current, provided any fault or current with a low independence part to the heart should also become the life. Integrity of the heart conductor is vitally because of its fail the protections in the removal. So you have something they call a heart cable also is very necessary, right? Isolation. So we're talking about the isolation of supply. The isolation of supply. So when we're talking about the isolation of supply, right, it involves the physical separation of equipment from any source of electrical power and ensure that it can also be inadequate or re-emphasized where the switch of the refer to deprive the equipment of electrical power but leaving it unconnected, right? We're talking about the double installation, right? What is double installation in this context, right? It's used to ensure that the live part of an equipment are covered by 2 layers of installation materials. It relies on the insulations rather than the electrical system itself for safety, but must be routine visually inspected because there is no heart protection. This simply means that double installation means that the protection of a cable, right, or electrical cable is sometimes like a wire or a sponge that they put underneath this cable to protect it from rain, from weather condition, for it not to expose to other destructive equipment around, right, to protect lives and property also. So double installation is more important also. Then double installation also, it reduces the sounds of every equipment, right? So when there is an installation, it cannot remove high sound, right, because it condenses the sound, right? So we're talking about residual current device. Residual current device is called the RCD. What is the RCD, right? RCD or sensitive current operating in heart leakage, right? Or circuit breaker, right? It's called the ELCB. Can also compare the current flowing in the live and the neutral conductor and therefore detect the leakage current too small to operate a fuse, right, but large enough to deliver a electrical shock or start a fire. Whilst they do not reduce the current voltage or the circuit flow, they also do to reduce the time the current actually flow and ensure that any shock is not lethal, right? So the RCD is the residual current device also. They also serve as a conductor by reducing the electrical shock, right? Then what reducing or low voltage, right? These are also control measures, reducing or low voltage, right? System should also be used wherein environmental conditions are harsh or wet, right? There is high risk of electrical shock to reduce the effect of any shock for handheld portable tools and the smaller transportable units. 100 voltage, right? So all these ones are how you can reduce electrical power, right? Then also talking about competent person. What is competent person in electrical safety, right? Where a worker or electrical system creates a danger or a risk of a person injury, then the employer must restrict that worker to those people who have the necessary technical knowledge or experience to be able to carry out the working safely in this context, right? A competent person has one. It should have the knowledge of electricity, right? Then also experience of electrical work. Then also should have an understanding of a system to be worked on. Then an understanding of hazard and the precaution needs, right? Then the ability to recognize whether it is safe for work to continue, right? So these are the qualities that a competent person in electrical safety should have. You should have the knowledge of electricity, the experience of electrical work, and also an understanding of the system to be working on, and also an understanding of the hazard and the precaution, the measure, the control measure that is supposed to have. Also, you should have the ability to recognize whether it's safe to work at this present moment or is not safe, right? So the extent of a person's knowledge and experience needed will also have to be divided by the employer, decided by the employer. The employer should decide this one, that the person is competent. It may also be that these requirements can also be relaxed or provided an adequate level of supervision is also applied, right? So an apprentice or electrician can gain experience or provided by an appropriate supervision, right? So I'm going to explain also what is a safe system of work. Safe system of work must be developed when work on a near electrical system creates a risk, right? So there are several issues that might be considered. What are safe system of work? Work on a near live electrical system. Worker must not be carried out or near a live electrical system except if it's very practical or circumstance, right? So permit, you should always have permits to work. Competence person, you should also have an insulating PPE, that is personal protective elements, right? Also installation tools and equipment. Then designations working area, you should have a certain area which your work shall commence, right? Not every area you should do this kind of electrical work. Then we're talking about insulation. What is insulation, right? Most workers on an electrical system should also be carried with a system with the system dead, right? These requirements, the isolation usually require breaking of the circuit, physical securing of breaker in the circuit, then some from the label or tag, right? So we're talking about another point, talking about locating or burial service, right? So plan of the areas of excavation, you should always check, right, if this area they have an electrical circuit under. Then contacts with overhead power line, right? So prevention of the accidents associated with proximity to live overhead power or cable can also be achieved by isolation, right? So you have to use a different area where there is no overhead cable, right? So then also use of the SSW permit system to control access in damaged area, then using barrier or signage and a goal post to keep these plants or these vehicles safe, right? Where you're working, you should have barrier, right, to protect people from electrical shock or any other hazard. They should have a bankman, like people who will give you direction when you are doing your electrical work, or so you have people who will help you. Then non-conducting equipment, that equipment that that is rubber, that will not people should use this equipment so you're not having any electrical shock. So let's say your gloves or your equipment should not be conducting electrical shock, right? So we're talking about emergency flowing and electrical incidents. So I will also explain on that one emergency procedure following an electrical incident is my next topic. Okay, let me proceed further to speak on this emergency procedure following an electrical incident. If in spite of all the available control measures have been placed, an electrical incident occur in a place, all workers should also be aware of the following method for dealing with the electrical casualty. So in dealing with this electrical casualty, do not touch them. Whenever someone have shock, do not touch them also. Then call for help. Then switch off every electrical supply. You have to switch it off. Then call for an ambulance. Then also, if they cannot be switched off, then be carefully push or pull them away from the live parts or the live cable using a non-conductor like a stick or a wood material to push this person, right? Then also check the breathing of the person. If the person is still breathing, right? Then if the person is breathing, apply a CPR, right? You have to apply CPR. Then treat any obvious burns, right? Any obvious burn, you have your first aid kits, right? Then treatment for psychological shock. Then make sure that they get the professional medical treatment, right? Then also carefully assess of the situation when approaching the casualty is important for the two reasons. So it's very important whenever someone is being shocked, you have to check if there is any cable that is around. Maybe the person is still attached to this cable, because immediately you touch this person also with your bare hands, also you can also be shocked also. Then we're talking about another topic, talk about the inspection and maintenance strategy, right? So inspection and maintenance strategy is to ensure a safety when any electrical equipment is used. It is important that it is regularly inspected and maintained. This involves all equipment should also be checked. Identify which equipment has to be maintained and where and how. Then discourage unauthorized equipment in working place. So whichever equipment that is not authorized to in every facility, or which is not according to the ISO standard operation, you should not use that equipment also. Then carry out a simple use check for signs of damage and case plug, right? Then also a competent person carry out a formal visual inspection, right? They have to do a formal inspections, periodically test all this equipment. Then following the procedure for reporting and replacing of defective equipment, you have to check all this equipment randomly. Then recording all maintenance and test results along with the inventory equipment. So whenever they do inspection of any equipment, right, they have to check all this equipment. They have to date. This date they check this equipment, this date they check check this equipment, right? Then deciding on the frequency of maintenance should also be based on assessment of risks and also the legal requirements enforced in your country. Factors to consider when making an assessment include, when you are making an assessment of every equipment, what are the steps? Number one, type of equipment and whether or not it had head, right? So you have to check according to your country standard. This equipment is it's applicable in my country, it's legal. Then number two, manufacturer recommendation. You have to check for the manufacturer recommendation. Is service going to be done in my country? How am I going to service this one every month? Which are the equipment I have to use to service this one? Then point number three, initial integrity and the soundness and the age of this equipment. So it's simple, right? In every equipment, like a forklift, if you cannot take a forklift of 1920, right? So you have to check which dates, right? Then you can use that equipment now. You have to check the date, right? Then we're talking about working environments in which the equipment can be used, right? So you know that some certain equipment, electrical equipment, they can be applicable in certain environments, right? Because of weather, climate. So if the weather, climate doesn't permit you to use this equipment, you should not use this one in that particular country. Then you have to use frequent analysis, frequency of using, right, and record of maintenance, including both formal inspection and combined inspection, right? So I'm going to mention advantage and disadvantage of limitation of portable appliance. Portable appliance, like equipment that you cannot use. It's very portable, right? It has a battery, right? So it is important that portable electrical appliances are maintained in exactly the same way as fixed as equipment. Portable appliance testing. Advantage: you can also detect the detection of faults not visible to the eyes, early removal or repair of unsafe equipment, then demonstrate of this legal compliance, then threading or partner of the faults by the spot. Then limitation. What is limitation? Provide proof of safety at one moment in time only. Then do not ensure safe use of prevent misuse, right? You have to make use of it. You don't have to misuse it. Item may be missing than remaining on test, right? Then cannot apply all equipment, right? So to conceptualize all this one, we have talked about the advantage and of portable appliance, right? And also it has the disadvantage. So I stop here.